Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton, but where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and low prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our Mom Sense and Dad Sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton.
It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode.
Help. I like my friend's ex. What do I do? How do you follow a gentle parenting technique while you're being physically assaulted by your toddler? SOS, I think I married my dad, but not in a good way. Hi, I'm Haven. I started Haven, the podcast. It's a safe space for curiosity and conversation. And we talk about everything from relationships to parenting to friendships to even your view of yourself. And we don't have answers or solutions, but I think the power is actually in the questions. So I'd love for you to join me, Haven, the podcast.
Today is a very special, heartfelt episode. I'm having my friend and fellow podcaster on. She is Haven Weits, and together we're on the Evergreen Network, and so we have so much in common. Her show, Haven, is a safe space for curiosity and conversations, especially when it comes to relationships. Today, we're going to be diving into relationship dynamics between mothers and daughters, where she'll speak to the bond that she shares with her mom. Many of you know her and love her. She is Lisa Whelchel, 80s sensation Blair Warner from the Facts of Life. Haven's going to shed her own facts of life with us on how to really foster a relationship that's lifelong with your mom and parents, and how she's doing that with her daughter. So this is going to be very fun and enlightening. Haven, welcome to That's Total Mom Sense.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. I mean, we had that call, I guess, a couple weeks ago, and we just gabbed for like an hour. So I feel like this will just be a continuation of that.
Yes. I want to start with your childhood. And something that you share on your website is you've been this curious person who would just ditch the whole family and follow the tour guide when you went sightseeing. And you've also had this entrepreneurial spirit where whether you're launching lemonade stands or your very own babysitters club with friends. So take us back to this time when you were a little, Haven.
Okay, so I think I was even given that opportunity because I was homeschooled growing up. So my mom had 3 kids in 3 years, and she just dove headfirst into being a mom. And she even went the route of specific curriculum because my brother, who's older than me, he was diagnosed with ADHD. So the traditional school was really tough for him. It was really hard for him to sit still and, to focus. And so my mom kind of set up our education of, okay, let's read for 20 minutes and then go shoot basketballs. So she made it very specific to like what would work for our family. And so we went to a ton of museums. So I grew up it was a part of our education to go and learn. And I enjoyed it because it didn't feel like education. It felt like learning. And so I think that's also what fostered curiosity. And then the lemonade stands was because she could see what was interesting to us. And I loved whenever I think I saw it like on some type of TV show and I was like, you could do that? I was like, you can make money because we didn't get an allowance as a kid. So money was just like birthdays. And my mom said, yeah, okay. And so we got the supplies. And she said, after you pay me back for the supplies, whatever you have, you can keep. And I just was shocked. I had no idea money was that easy to make, AKA like just like making drinks and people bought it. And so that was just my favorite hobby as a kid with my best friends. And eventually we got our little sisters in where we told them to take wagons door to door to the neighbors while we jumped on the trampoline. So like we eventually were delegating ourselves out of working in the business and still making money. So yeah, I'd say that was like my first kind of entrepreneurial experience.
What made her feel like, after your brother Tucker, that you and your sister Clancy would also learn at home?
She always described it growing up as like young children growing up in a greenhouse of it's not a bad thing to shelter them until they're strong enough to stand on their own. And sometimes the world's elements come in too harsh and too strong to something that's a little too fragile and too frail and too impressionable. And so I think she kind of viewed it as, I'm going to keep you guys in a safe greenhouse until you're able to make some decisions that I think that wouldn't rock you when, the intensity of the outside factors come in. So I think she just saw it as, world's really tough. I'd like to prepare you as best as I can before exposing you to things that really could destroy your little hearts.
And, you mentioned your faith, and I feel like that's really the cornerstone of your upbringing. Your father's a pastor, and, tell us about some of the values that they really instilled in you.
Forgiveness is a big one, especially with siblings close in age. And I would say we fought a ton growing up. Like we fought so much growing up that I'm glad we're friends as adults. Like my birthday's coming up this week, and the only thing I want to do is go to Disneyland with my siblings. So that's what we're going to do Friday. So I'd say we're very close as adults, but as kids, like we fought tooth and nail. But one visual that really struck with me is my mom would always include like Bible verses as she was kind of teaching us things and even instructing us. And there was one time in particular where my brother he continued to say like some cruel things. And so my mom had him take a hammer and nail, go outside to the backyard, to the fence, and hammer these nails in. And then later she had him come back and they were all rusty and crusty and decrepit. And she was like, okay, like after a couple, days of them in the sprinkler. And she said, okay, remove these nails. She was like, okay, your words, you said those harsh things. And even if you say you're sorry and you try and remove them, look at the damage it left. Look at that's what is happening to your sister's heart when you say harsh things. And even if you say you're sorry after a while, there's still something left there. And so she would pair that with some scripture and give us kind of the visual there. So I would say it was just infused in everything she did.
That is something that I definitely want to pass on to our kids, that is going to shape who they become as adults. And we need to let them know that, we have to respect each other's feelings and the impact that it has on our hearts.
Yeah, even if it's siblings, it's those harsh words, they linger.
Could you share, a gospel song that you grew up listening to that you still think of fondly?
Yeah, when I think of my mom, I think of how she would sing, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." And the specific part is like, Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. And so that's kind of what I hear in my head when I picture, even a little lullaby.
Oh, that is the sweetest thing. Well, she had all three of you so close together, and this just hits home for me because I had twins and then my third in 18 months. So I also
Wow, girl. Are you okay?
Now I am. Now they're 7 and 6, and I feel like it's like a whole new wind.
Amazing.
Yeah. But when we were, in the trenches, the 3 in diapers, we had 3 different colored bottles. I nursed them all. It was a fog. Has she told you about how she got through those days now that you're a mom? Like how did she get through that tough time?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a question I now ask as a mom. I was like, how? Like, that's just my only question is how? I have no idea. She did tell me, she was like, the saying of sleep when the baby sleeps? She goes, I'm not kidding. She was like, nothing happened in the house. She was like, I just, like, especially when, My brother Tucker came. She was like, I just would knock out when he slept, when you came. Like, so she really was a big proponent of like the nap schedule.
Yeah.
We took naps way later than we ever should have. Like, I would say we were taking naps up until we were like 7 or 8 years old. And then it was also just quiet time in the room. So I think the way she did it was she was very, very structured. And my mom's a really strategic thinker. So I think she just saw it as like, these are the blocks. She would have a literal Excel spreadsheet for us as like toddlers I found in a baby box, where it was like a row was each of our names. And then, the columns was each of our names. And the rows was like the time. And I would say it was almost like 15 or 30-minute increments where it's like, okay, when, Tucker's doing reading time, Haven's doing crafts, Clancy's taking nap, or like all of these things. And so I think she was just so specific and on top of it. But I would say it was just because her life was the kids that whole time, I think she just threw herself into it. I still to this day, I'm like, I don't know how you did it.
One thing I learned from the podcast that you recorded with her, and we will tease this in our show notes because I can't wait for you to hear the interaction that Haven and her mom have. I love that she parented you all differently. You're, your own unique individuals. And it's like she could pinpoint like, this is going to resonate with, my older one, and this is going to resonate with my younger one. And she made this analogy of like a box of crayons and was like, for Tucker, it's going to be just the main colors that you get in a standard box. I don't think it's like 7 or 10, and it's the fire engine red and the sunshine yellow, and it's what you see is what you get. And with you, she said, it's all the jewel tones. It's just those magnificent like midnight blues and fuchsias. And then with your sister Clancy, it's the fluorescent colors, the fun hot pinks and neon yellows. And I just thought that is so, so fun and brilliant. And like to know you could share that with your kid and then they'll see it too, that like we really are different and colorful in our own way.
Yeah. And it also just felt like, one, good to be seen, to have your mom see something in you and speak words over you. But also the differences that don't equate to different values. She always said growing up, like, I parent you differently because you're different kids. And so she would parent each of us differently. So I was never the kid growing up to say that's not fair because we were all unique. And so she was going to handle everything uniquely with us. And so I think it also kind of set the tone that I see the differences in you and I value them, and I see the differences in your siblings too.
Yes, yes. And there's so many things that she did that was just so ahead of her time, because there's all these, child development experts and parenting coaches that are writing books about it now. And she was already doing it a long time ago. So I love it. One is the independent and guided play. I actually just released a series with Bright Horizons. They're a known daycare and elder care facility across the nation. And I was joined by Claire Goss, who is a child education expert. And she spoke about how, play matters. The segment is called Play Matters with Bright Horizons. It's just how kids show up in the world. And your mom knew that there's the guided play where it's like, I'm going to teach you something. We're going to build a block tower. We're going to, color in the lines, whatever it may be. But then there's the independent play where it's like, okay, I'm going to send all 3 to their rooms or outside and let them figure out what they want to do. There's no such thing as I'm bored. Use your imagination and your curiosity and don't be bored. And I love that. Can you take us back to those moments where you're like, yep, she carved out time for this, and this is what I did with my independent playtime?
Absolutely. I think part of it was the necessity of 3 kids. Like, you just can't entertain 3 kids. And so how can we make that happen? But I will say, my mom had a group of girlfriends that came over for a game afternoon. I would say it was almost as frequently as like once a week. And it was during the afternoon. And they would send all of the kids outside. And they said, you're not allowed to come in unless you're bleeding. And they're like, everyone else can figure it out. Like, truly, you cannot, even if we're having fights. And so we sorted it out, us and our, these kids, and we would just play. And so I think it just caused so much time for imagination. We had a pool. There was like a little design of like, you remember like the 90s, like designs of like dolphins on the bottom of the pool?
Oh, yeah.
Like So we would go down with the dolphins and we were like mermaids, or, we would do something with pirate ships, or it gets a little dangerous when you let kids do independent play, because we would jump from the trampoline into the pool. And then we had this little gazebo kind of like covering like over like where the outside table was. And we would jump from that to the trampoline to the pool. So we also like, it taught us a lot about risk. It taught us a lot about, conflict resolution with other kids. Like, I think it also just, the independent play is not only good for the imagination, but it's also good to just give a kid confidence that they can handle life, by themselves. Obviously, the moms were looking out the window. We weren't drowning, but
right.
unless it was a real issue, they needed their mom time. And that also taught me that my mom prioritizing herself there was important. And it was actually more important than me then. Like, my quote unquote necessarily needed to be paused so she could take care of her needs. So I think that's also great. Sometimes I feel like our culture is like drop everything for your kids and, be 10 to everything. And I'm like, I don't know what message that's putting on kids, is like the pressure of you're the world, you're the center. It is important for kids to know, nope, sometimes you orbit, sometimes you're not the sun.
The other thing you mentioned at the top of this interview was about the allowance and not getting any. And, the same kind of went in my household growing up too. That's something that my husband Sunil and I are cultivating in our home, is we all do like family chores. That's part of the Gupta family values. They don't get paid for that. And I think it's so important to teach that, because these are life skills, and you're just taking responsibility of yourself, of your cleanliness, of how you, like make your bed, maintain your room, because you're not going to get paid for that when you're an adult. You just do it. But then if you have something entrepreneurial like your lemonade stand, then by all means, because you used imagination and resources to come up with something new. So many kids did get allowance. It's like, oh, you mowed the lawn, here's $10. It's like, that just didn't happen in your home. So how did you reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just saw it as like, this is how we contribute to the family. It was never having like a monetary tie to it. I also want to add the caveat of we were privileged growing up. Like I never was hungry. Our fridge was full. And so I think that also, I can't deny that that's the factor there too of, birthdays I would get gifts and Christmases were wonderful. And so I also don't think it was like this deep, intense longing. But I would say that like my mom every morning, she gave us a printed piece of paper with the chores we were supposed to do that day. And we had to check them off. Each of us, we got our own piece of paper with what we were supposed to do that day. And she would make sure it was done correctly. And so it was just a part of life growing up in there. I remember when I was becoming, I think like 13 or 14, my mom said, okay, like, back to school season, we typically get you clothes. Now this year, like you're old enough to get like a babysitting or other jobs. So we're going to pay for the necessities, AKA like generic shampoo and conditioner, your food in the fridge. But if you want to go to the movies, if you want special hair care, if you want outfits that are nicer than just the back to school things, that's on you. And so I think it was also like they gave us the necessities, but if we wanted anything extra, that was on us. And it gave us incentives to do it, where if I wanted, Tresemme hair care, I had to go find a way to make that extra like $12 difference than the Suave generic she was going to buy,
Another thing that she created that was a really sacred time was window time. Tell us about that.
At night, when we were about to go to bed, when kids are all trying to delay that inevitable bedtime, my mom's like, I'm going to capitalize on that. She saw it as a window into our souls. So she would call it window time, and she would come sit on our beds and we would save up anything that we wanted to talk to her about that day, anything that was special. And we didn't want like our siblings to steal the focus, or anything that we were maybe ashamed about or confused, or, maybe wanting to even confess and just bring to light with her. And so it was a really, really sacred time. I never felt rushed as a kid. I felt like I really got to share everything that was on my heart that day. I feel like I had my mom's full attention, where, during the day, you don't always feel like it's the undivided attention. So it was really, really important. It was really special. And yeah, I did that well into my teens.
And now let's move into how, your mother-daughter relationship evolved and, how she first told you about like puberty and when you're a teen.
Yeah. So, well, when it comes to the telling about puberty, I remember my mom always kind of being upfront of like, okay, eventually, like you're going to start your period, and it's a sign of womanhood. So I was psyched. I was like, when's this happening? I'm ready. Like, I want to be a woman. I was so excited to get boobs. I got a training bra, and I was like, when do I fill these things out?
Yeah, we got it way ahead of our time. It was like, okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
So she kind of prepped me, and I was like psyched about it. She continued to move the boundaries back and give me space that was age appropriate. A lot of my friends' moms never really moved the boundaries for each age, so they would feel confined and trapped. And even like when we were going somewhere, if we were driving and talking in the back seat, another mom chiming in, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, you're not invited into this conversation. Like, I remember being like kind of like shocked when like other moms would involve themselves in their daughter's life unprompted. Like, my mom always gave me this space to come to her, and I would want to invite her in because she was never trampling in my space. So I think that's the difference. Is I feel like my mom definitely had outside boundaries, but she sat me down before high school and she said, this can either be an incredible 4 years of your life. I want to give you enough freedom to enjoy it. And there are certain things that we're going to expect of you. But if you don't follow those, guide rails that we expect, these 4 years are going to be really tough for you, and they're going to be really frustrating. You're going to have privileges taken away. She was like, we don't have, huge, massive amounts of like rules, but the ones we do, I expect you to follow. And I saw my brother not do that. I was like, that didn't work out well for him. So, okay. And so even when I got my driver's license, I loved driving to school for like the first couple weeks. It felt so amazing, but I missed my mom driving and picking me up for our conversations. So at 16, I was like, can you please still drive me to school? I was like, I just miss it. But it was me asking her. She never was pushing pressure. And so I would see my friends who were just trying to run away from their moms because they were trapped. And I was like, yeah, she's there when I need her. I don't need her as much as I did before, but when I need her, I definitely need her.
Yes. What were some of those boundaries that like she kind of outlined? Because I want to just download everything that she's done and then have a powwow with you. And what are you doing with kids? Like, yeah.
Well, again, we are kids of the 90s, and it was a really strong like faith time then. So she basically was saying like, don't drink, don't smoke, and don't have sex. Like, those are the specifics. And here's a curfew. And like, those are like the biggest kind of pillars of it there. But I was like, cool, those are big. The only one that it was maybe tough for me is when I had a boyfriend I fell in love with. Those got a little trickier, but I was like, yeah, drinking doesn't sound interesting. Smoking sucks. Like, curfew, I would just ask sometimes. Like, she also gave me always permission to ask. It wasn't like arguing, but it was, hey, there's this one certain movie. Like, can we please come home later? Or, sometimes it was yes, sometimes it was no. But it was also never like this is my rules and my life. Like, I had built enough trust with her because especially as a kid growing up, the thing that crushed my heart more than anything was when I broke trust. I didn't want to do it often, but when I did, she was like, okay, now we have to rebuild. Like, you've broken my trust, and that takes so much time to come back. So I had felt what that felt like as a kid to break her trust, and I never wanted to break her trust. And so I would rather be upfront with what I wanted to do and what I was trying to and tell her than have her find out another way and then we break the bond.
Speaking of high school, that is where you met your husband. You two were high school sweethearts. Tell us all the deets.
Well, yeah, it's crazy. So I wasn't allowed to date till I was 16. So I could go to school dances with people, but not date. But again, I don't know if this is just my personality. I was like, awesome. Now I can just hang out with friends and not have pressure of like, who I'm going to date or who I'm going to like or who I'm going to let down. Like, it also, the boundaries gave me a ton of freedom. Like, the inverse of it was so much freedom. And so I just genuinely enjoyed hanging out with friends. Like, my husband now, his name's Aaron. We were in a band together. Like, I play drums, he plays guitar. We had like 5 of our friends over every Friday night to play music. And then like bake cookies or go to hide and seek or like play shows. And so we were friends for about 2 years. And then right before I turned 16, I was like around like 3 months or 2 months shy of it, like 15. He was like, I really like you. Actually, before he did that, because he knew that rule, he was friends with my brother. They had been friends before. So he told my brother and he was like, I want you to know, like, I like your sister and I think I want to like date her. He was like, but I want to make sure it's like cool with you because we're friends. And he said, yeah. And then I think my brother's like, she's not allowed to date. You got to talk to our parents.
Yes.
And so then before he asked me out, he went to my parents and he said, I know that 1, you have a rule like for her not to date till she's 16. And 2, he was 2.5 years older. So he was 18 at the time. He's like, I also know that I'm 18. And he was like, obviously we've been, friends. And my mom essentially was like, we've known you for 2 years. Like, we know who you are. We feel more comfortable with her being with you than like guys her age at 16. So like you have our permission. And so then he asked me out. And so he had permission. So that was one of the boundary rules, but they didn't hold them so hard and fast that would make me want to rebel or do things in the shadows or hide. They were like, okay, yeah, sure. You can date a couple months before you turn 16. So then we started dating and we were like best friends, and we both went to the same college nearby. And I never thought I would marry my first boyfriend. I literally told him, I would be like, you're such a great first boyfriend. Thank you for this experience. Like, you set the bar high. And he would be like, we're still dating. Like, why are you calling me your first boyfriend?
So sweet. Yeah. Because you're
like,
just wise.
Yeah.
But I love that it worked out.
Well, yeah, I really just thought he was just a great first boyfriend and giving me such a good experience. But yeah, we just, kept going.
For the long haul. Yes. And then what about the journey into parenthood for you and Aaron?
Yeah. So when we first got married, we said, okay, we'll have kids in 3 to 5 years. Like, that was kind of our plan. But we got married super young. Like, it was like 2 weeks after I turned 21. So then we hit 3 years. We're like, this is way too fun. Let's not ruin this with like the landlocked nature of kids. Let's kick it out, So we kicked it out to like 5 years. And then I remember waking up on my birthday. I think it was like my 26th birthday because it was 5 years in. And I was like, I'm ready. Like, Aaron was always a little bit ahead of me. He was ready to date before I was thinking about it. He was ready to get married before it was on my mind. And he was ready to be a parent. So he's always just, maybe it's just the nature of our relationship. He had said that before. And now I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not certain. But then I was like, I'm so ready. But then, you know how it goes. I had enough friends that had dealt with fertility journeys where I was like, we could get pregnant in a month or, 3 years. You never, ever know. So I at least had the grace of supporting friends who had gone through that to know there could be some issues here. And so ultimately, it took almost 2 years for us to get pregnant. Our daughter came when we had been married for 7 years, and we were just thrilled. Like, waiting so long for something, it's just, it tastes sweeter to me. And so it was just very, very, very special. And then, when she was 4 months old, the day after I went back to work from my maternity leave, then the pandemic happened. Then we got every single day of her life for the first year of her life, for a year and a half, almost 2 years, home, because LA was locked down for a while. So the timing of getting to have this newborn to give you a reason to get up and walk and play and laugh during a really, really confusing, dysfunctional, depressing time in our world was incredible. We got the most bonding parent life with her to be with her. And we're working parents, so we would have otherwise not gotten those like precious times together. But yeah, having a kid in a pandemic was definitely a really strange experience.
Do you have a mom sense moment that you can think of? And by that, I mean a time where you just blindly trusted that inner voice that we have. And I know we rely on it a lot, but if there's something that just sticks out in your memory.
When we put my daughter Isley in preschool, she was 3 years old. She'd been speech delayed. So we had her in speech therapy, and she was really working on her words, and she was like finally starting to access. I knew she always understood things, but she was able to vocalize and access it and go to school. And, not only the pandemic kids were they kind of a little bit more like less inclined for the social stuff, but it was just a whole new world going to school. And so it was a big transition. So I remember a couple months in where I was doing a parent-teacher conference with the teachers. And I was like, well, what's Isley like, in class? They're like, well, at this moment, she still doesn't say a ton, but you can see everything with her eyes. Like she can tell you everything that she's thinking and feeling with her eyes. And she was like, and I can tell, like, if like kids are getting a little loud and rowdy, she'll kind of like put her toys to the side and just kind of look at you, like what's happening with them. Or she was like, she expresses a lot. Then they were like, but she's really shy. And so work with doing some play dates with some other kids outside of the class. And I came back, and as part of me was like, yes, of course I want to give her access with speech therapy and social tools like preschool. But I was like, I don't think shyness is a problem to be fixed. I don't think that's something I need to work on with her personally. I disagreed, and I love their teachers, so it's never a knock on that at all. But I was just thinking, I don't want to put this pressure of her in these scenarios if she's not comfortable. And I learned there's a woman I follow, Dr. Becky. I love what she talks about, but essentially I found this later because that was my intuition, but I didn't have a lot to back it up. But she was like, shy kids are confident kids. You don't want them when they're 16 to go with peer pressure. So if the kid is like not comfortable doing something and you force them and say, no, look, every other kid's doing it. Why wouldn't you go out? They're having fun. Can't you have fun or talk? Or, you're shutting down their inner voice instead of saying, okay, when you're ready, I trust you. You know yourself. You know your body when you're ready. So I think my mom's sense was that shyness is not a default I need to work and coach her on. I actually need to let her develop and trust herself, and she'll do things if and when she's ready and when she wants to.
Lastly, I just want to tease, something that you're working on with Erin, where you are really exploring couples dynamics, because I would love to have you on again where we go through that, but tell us about it.
Let's do it. Yeah, we just filmed a relationship e-course called Pillow Talk. So it's my husband. We've been married for 12 years, and we brought in our actual marriage counselor that we've been seeing for 13 years because we saw him before we got married. And he's taught us so much about what like a healthy dynamic of a relationship looks like, and helped us kind of like as like the scaffolding early in our marriage, and now more like tune-ups. But I was thinking, there's so many, when people come to my podcast, I took a form and I was like, what are you here for? What are you listening for? And a lot of it was relationships. The number one was marriage. A lot of people were really interested in the dynamic I have with my husband, and then parenting, and then friendship. It kind of goes under the umbrella. But I was like, we've learned so much over 12 years of our own experience. And so we created Pillow Talk, which is essentially like relationship prompts for you and your spouse or partner, where it's a e-course that's broken down in specific modules. You watch them, and then there's like a pause where you talk together, and there's different PDFs. And so it's me and Erin and our counselor, Dr. Kood, of specific themes of how can you get to know yourself better? How can you get to know your spouse better? And how can we learn like what's actually happening, in our bodies, or what are the patterns here? And so our first course that we're releasing is called How to Fight Better. And it's all about conflict. And even I'll tease even a little bit of the line that I'm still like ruminating over is most of the issues, this is a Gottman study, are perpetual issues and not, solvable issues. So it's not even really conflict resolution. It's conflict regulation. And how can we work on that together as couples? And so I'm so thrilled about it. I loved filming it. If anything else, if no one, purchased it, I was like, well, I learned a lot and I loved it. But I think it's going to be really, really cool for couples to kind of go together through it. And so my husband and I, we've done some premarital counseling for a couple other couples over the years. And so we also got input for them of like what helped you and what we talked about and what were the takeaways. So we tried to modify what we've done before, but then kind of make it online and accessible to a bigger audience. We can't do one-on-ones with every couple that we'd like to. And so how can we, make it a little bit of a broader reach?
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I loved our conversation, and I'll include all your links below. Definitely subscribe to Haven Podcast. And anything else you want to share with our audience?
I loved it. I mean, I'm assuming it's mainly moms listening. So I just want to say, as someone who grew up with a great mom, you're making all the difference in the world. Like the things that the little seeds you're planting that no one's seeing, it feels like you're just watering dirt. They do grow and they do blossom in our hearts. And they're things that we carry through our lives. And maybe we don't have the words, especially as children or young adults, to thank you for it or even recognize what you're doing. But there is going to be a time in our lives where we do see it. Maybe it's when we have kids, or maybe it's when we have like a big life event. But then we're going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, look at all my mom did for me. And just the profound gratitude. I'll say it if your kids aren't there yet. I'll say it on behalf of them in the future. But thank you for all you're doing for your kids.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some great takeaways from our conversation. Join my community by logging on to thatstotalmomsense.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast, wherever you listen, and be sure to rate and review. On socials, my handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and X. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My episode videos are on YouTube and YouTube podcasts with highlights on YouTube Shorts. Write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. My team and I read all your pitches and feedback and are so glad to be in touch. Remember, always trust your mom sense and dad sense. Stay strong, super parents. See you soon.